guys. Yesterday we had a session on how to do web development with the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So today we are going to escalate it a bit and going to talk about the two frameworks and technology that are most used in the web development nowadays. That is the Node.js and React.js. Hello, and I'm Abhijit Chatterjee, the web lead at GDSC VIT Bhopal, and along with me is Akshit, who is the co-lead. Akshit, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Akshit here, and it's good to have this session.
Okay, so firstly, we'll begin with Node.js. So hope my screen is visible.
Yeah,
Can you confirm?
yeah, it's visible.
Okay, so firstly, what is Node.js all about? So when JavaScript was first developed, it was only used to run on browsers, and there is no what you call platform to run it on our systems. uh, like assuming that we use Java has a JDK environment that can use to run the Java codes on the system, but there was no such thing as Java for JavaScript. So Node.js is a platform that is built on Chrome's JavaScript runtime for easy building of fast and scalable network applications. Node.js is use this event-driven and non-blocking I/O model, which makes it lightweight, efficient, uh, and perfect for data-intensive and real-time tasks. Also, Node.js has a tons of libraries to help your building of your backend or front end, whatever be it. So Node.js can be said as a combination of the JavaScript runtime and the JavaScript libraries that it has. Also, Node.js is open source and a cross-platform runtime environment for developing server-sides and client-side applications. So how the Node.js works? Well, there are two basic concepts that are used in Node.js, that is asynchronous and non-blocking I/O. So asynchronous is use of callback the moment we get a response from the server or the database from whichever we request. The callback function are called, which as soon as the work is done, returns back the request. And then we have the non-blocking I/O. Non-blocking I/O or internet output means working with multiple requests without blocking a particular thread for a single request. Now, what this means, we'll see in just the next slide, how previous models used to work and what is thread and all about. Also, Node.js is not good for actually CPU intensive work as it is lightweight and mostly used for data related stuffs. So, what are previous multi-threaded processing model? So in multi-threaded processing setups, each server is also a system. Server is also a computer system, and it has a limited number of resources, that is threads, right? So assuming your thread is a waiter, in the so each waiter is sending a single request. So plus one UI UX. If you good for the client who is using it. So each time a server gets a request, it allots a thread to it. Thread is like a worker, which goes to the what you call backend data, so fetch the data that is required and return it back to the request. And for the time being, it's occupied. If there is rush hour, many requests won't be accepted by the server, and requests are only accepted if there are empty threads available. Hence, blocking our input and output of requests. Also, another issue is that if all of our server threads are used, so the system won't have anything to work for it. The threads are also required for system working. If you have studied about OS a bit, you will get what it is. If you haven't, just no worries. Understand that the thread is just a worker that does a particular task. Now, why is Node.js more efficient? So what Node.js approaches this problem using a single thread, but it can manage async calls and requests. what it does is each time a request comes, it adds to the event queue that is shown here. Just a sec. Is my cursor visible? So each time a request comes, then the server the next request automatically lands on the server. This way, while
Hello. Yeah, sorry for the inconvenience. I believe he's lagging a bit. So I'll just continue on from where he left. One second. Yeah, one second. Let this load. Yeah. One second. Come to- Yeah, so he was explaining the multi-threaded system. So basically, what happens is that whenever you send a request to the server, it tries to analyze it and sees that what all requests have been come before. So it basically goes into an event loop if it is an async function. So as you can see over here, the request is made from the client and the Node.js server receives it, and it goes into the single thread. And once the request has been processed
hello.
and it goes to the thread. Okay, yeah, Abhijit's back.
Okay. So till where did you explain?
So I was just explaining the event loop, so you can go ahead
Okay.
and continue with that. Yeah.
So assuming the event queue is full and the event loops are executing, so once an event is complete, it goes out, the next one comes, and so the loop event queue is maintained, and we do not lose any requests. So this is why Node.js is preferred now because it's cross-platform. It enables web developers to develop server-side applications, which was not earlier quite what you call easy because you need to have a browser for checking the things. Now you can run JavaScript application on any operating system and web servers. It has tons of libraries to much reduce your code work. Like tons of libraries are available in npm, so that you don't have to write each thing from scratch, which will take a lot of time. Asynchronous IO that we discussed just back, and lastly, you can write client side and server side code both. So there is no CORS error in between. What CORS is when you have two different platforms, the requests of API usually gets blocked. That is what CORS is. But using since both are using JavaScript, this doesn't happen. Now next, discuss about npm. So what is npm? As I told earlier, Node.js is a combination of JavaScript runtime that is handled by Node.js and the JavaScript library manager. That part is handled by npm. So it is a default package manager for JavaScript's runtime. It manages stores all the libraries that we can use in a JavaScript or TypeScript projects. It contains of two parts, that is the CLI, that is the command line interface for downloading and publishing packages, and an online repository to host the JavaScript packages. Now, what is a node package? So before we go to package, let's see a module. Assuming you wrote a file, assuming add.js, and you wrote a code to add two numbers in it. So that particular file is called a module, and a package is a collection of modules that work together to provide a particular feature, along with a package.json file. Now, what is package.json is like a metadata storage of your project, like what is the name of it, which GitHub repository has the codes for it, the license, and the dependencies that it requires, etc., and lots of stuff like that. So also packages can use other packages in between. and create some module files that can be added to the project. So how can we create our own npm package? So for that, first we'll need to create a folder as that is the name of your repository, and initialize a package.json in it with using npm init and -y. -y represent yes. So, and also we'll need git init to it so that we can make it a git repository. If you don't know how to make a repository, a git repository, you can trace back to the Hacktoberfest session that is there on the DSC YouTube channel. Then the first file that is executed in a Java runtime environment or a JavaScript package is index.js. Right. So we'll need to create it first. We create an index.js and write the code for what the package needs to do. Assuming if it needs to print hello world, so we do write console.log hello world. Or assuming you require an express package, so you will write const require express and then write the code for it using the APIs, etc., and whatever you want to do. Great. Now you have done it. You have created the file. How do we test it? So for testing the file, you can use node file name.js in the command line and see whether you are getting the expected output from it or not. If yes, it's out, you're out getting a perfect output, your npm package is nearly created. You just need to test it out whether it is being executed using the require and import statements, because at the end of the day, if anybody other uses your packages, he'll need to import it. So linking is quite important, which you can check using the command npm link. Now all that is left is to configure your JSON package.json file and testing the package before pushing it to the npm registry. Also, for pushing the package to the npm registry, you'll need to have a npm account first. So keep that in mind also. Now, when you do npm install, you are using packages contributed by others to npm registry. And when you publish it, you are giving a own package for others to use, as shown in the image you can see below. Now, we have seen what is Node.js all about. So first, then run the setup for it, and then go to command line and run node v. Similarly, also for Node.js npm install, also you have to check and use the Node.js next.js, and these are the commands how you can execute them. Let's see how the installation goes. Okay, just a sec. Mm, mm.
Yeah, sorry for the inconvenience. So he was talking about npm. So npm has a huge library of packages from which you can choose and integrate into your project, and like it's basically like a library where you can pick a package and just integrate it for the ease. So there are a lot of people who contribute to this, and you can just go ahead and clone it. Like you find repositories on GitHub. So one second, I even show you how to do this. Yeah. So if you go on to npm, you'll find different libraries. Say you wanted to create a random number, like generate a random number, you can just find a package for that and install it to your project, and you'll be good to go. Say I pick this package, and and you can just see the install command. So for the prerequisite for this is that you should have Node installed on your system, and you can just run this command and it will install it to your project. And in case you wanted to use it for, like, say, on your terminal only, and you can then you can also install it globally to your system, which is basically like running a running any command, like you're seeding into a directory, so you could even run the random command and get a random number there. So you can use npm, or you can even use yarn, which is a similar package manager but has some caching involved in it. So like I personally myself also use yarn rather than npm. So that's one thing. And you can just publish your own npm package if you want. See, you can see that this is the TypeScript symbol is over here. So you can even do it on TypeScript. So TypeScript is like, let's not go into TypeScript right now. I'll explain that later. So yeah. This is npm. It consists of a CLI, which I just showed you, like the command that you had to run. So this is the same thing, and the online repository is basically the site which you saw. So yeah. So package. So a node package is basically a project, a JS project or a TypeScript project, which is bundled into a package. And it's you can create your own, like I just said before. You can just npm init uh, your project, and then you can just there's a link in the comment section where you can just follow that tutorial and you'll be able to like deploy your own package. So for these packages, you can either install them, or you can even use a CDN to serve them into your package, like into your project. So you won't have to, like, I'll just show you. If I visit this GitHub link, then probably there must be a CDN. Like, yeah. So it contains all the source files. So you can just go ahead and include this in your index.html, and you'll have access to all the functions in it. So yeah, that's that. Moving on. So this is the steps for creating your own npm package. You have a package, like when you run this command npm init -y, what it basically does is it creates a node project and creates a package.json file. And a package.json file basically consists of all the dependencies that are involved in a project. It's basically metadata of your project. So it will contain the name of the project, the dev dependencies, the dependencies, and much more. So yeah, you'll see this very often in a project. I'll even show you in a code sandbox later. So you can just create an index.js file, which is basically the main file of the project. It's just a naming convention. You can even use your own. And then you can just run the index file by running node index.js to see the expected output. Then we have require statements and import statements. So by default, in the package.json, it is defined that the type is common JS. So if you see common JS anywhere, what it means is that you have to use the require keyword in order to import third-party packages. So say you installed a package, say you install this the random package. Then what you can do is that you can insert this, you can take this package and just require it in your JS file, and you'll be able to use it. So we'll see that further ahead once the sandbox is ready. One second. Yeah. So you can even do it in import statements. So if you just change that keyword of common JS in the package.json to a module, type module, then you'll be able to use the import statement, which is basically the most adopted, and it's default in ES6. So yeah, that's how you create a package. Then you can just install npm packages, as I said before. And for publishing the project which we just created over here, which is using this index.js file, you can just run the command npm publish, and it has certain requirements that you have to fulfill, and then you'll be able to publish it directly. So this is the installation guide for Node.js and npm. So you can just go to the Node.js site and download the software according to your operating system. For Windows, I believe it's just a exe file which you can download and install. And for a Linux system, you can just run the package managers command. Like on Ubuntu, you can say apt install node and npm. So if you have like Node installed on your system, you just have to run node-v, which will give you the version of the version of Node which you are running, as well as npm. You can just run npm dash dash version, and it will split the version of npm as well. And you can go ahead and do npm init and just run those files. I'll just go ahead and also show you a short demo for that. 1 second. Share screen. I'll say entire screen. 1 second. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So this. I hope my terminal is visible. And if I say node dash v, you can see that my node version is 14.17.3. And if I run npm dash v, you can see it's 6.14.15. And what you can do is that rather than using npm, like you can like for managing node versions, not rather than using npm, like if you want to switch between different versions of node, there's a package called nvm as well. So what this does is that it manages different versions of node. So you can just go ahead and install it from here. I'll just show you. You have to run the script for in the bash, and it will install it. I'll show you what this looks like. I say nvm dash v. So it shows that my nvm version is 0.38, and I can run the nvm command to switch between different node versions. So right now I'm running it on 14.17.3. So that's my node version. If you wanted to use a certain different version, you can just run this command like nvm use 16, then it will show the node version 16. So I'll just show you that as well. So right now my node version is 14, I believe. Yeah. So I'll say use 16, then it'll just switch to 16, and I'll have the node version 16.13. So this comes in requirement when your different projects use different versions of node. So say I had an old project which was using a particular version of node which is not compatible with the new version. So you could just switch back to the old version and just code in that. So that's how nvm works. Yeah. Let's move on to the next slide. Yeah. So some common npm packages are Express.js, React.js, and Next.js. We will be looking into React today in further slides. But Express.js is basically a server-side package which is used for backend development. So you can even do backend development in vanilla Node, but Express.js helps you a lot in creating certain HTTP requests, giving out routes, and many more things. So you can just run npm init and install Express, and you can just spin up a REST API in no time. And then React.js, this is one of my favorite frameworks. I use it on a daily basis. You can go ahead and install React in a project by npx create React app functionality. We'll go over this further in the further tutorial. And Next.js is a framework built upon React. So I'll show you the site for this. It's a really beautiful package, framework of React. So what it specializes in providing, like, optimizing React for production based websites and web apps. So Next.js, like, it has many functionalities. For example, in React, the routing part was very difficult, and Next.js solves it very easily. Like, you just have to create certain files and name the certain routes with those files, and it will create it. Then Next.js also provides you with SEO optimization and much more. Like, I could take a whole session on that. So let's go ahead with The next slide for now. So yeah, let's move on to React, which is my favorite part. So you can see the technologies on here. So React has different compilers out there. Like we on React we have Webpack, okay, and then we have Vite, and then Next.js has its own compiler. I believe the new version of Next.js, Next.js 12, has a Rust compiler, which is very efficient. Yeah. So let's move on. So what is React? React is basically a front-end framework where you can just import components, reuse certain components in your whole in your whole project. Like with HTML, you create a certain div. Like you say you wanted to create a card, so you'll give it certain styling and give it certain properties, give it some data, and then you'll just have to copy paste it in HTML. You can reuse the CSS, but the basic the JS elements, like the JSX elements, have to be repeated again and again. With React, you can delete that part. You can just reuse the particular component in different files, and the web page becomes really super fast. Yeah. So these are certain organizations that use React. We have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and many more. Like I have this tool installed over here. This detects what site is using React and not, which is not. So you can see that this particular Google Slides website is not using React. If I go to say Spotify, then it should probably detect that it's React. Yeah, see the yeah, so it says this page is using the production build of React. So this is a very handy tool, and even I believe Medium is also using React. And you can just console open the console and see the components in React as well. So it uses a virtual DOM. We'll come back to this. uh, 1 second, I'll give the whole demo there. Yeah. Yeah. So before understanding what React is, I want to explain what the importance of React is. So, if you attended the last session, I talked about SCSS, SAS. So what it is, it's a framework built on CSS, and similarly, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. So this complex codes can be just compiled down to static files like HTML, CSS, and GSS, and can be served on the internet, because the browser doesn't understand SAS or TypeScript. So it requires some compilation to be done, and React provides like a better developer experience. Like you can use all these tools like SCSS and TypeScript for a better development experience. The code looks clean and everything, and it just converts all this complex code into a code that a browser can understand. So that's what compilation does. So this is very much required before it's deployed. So we'll look into this further, where we discuss some Webpack and Vite.js and many more things. Yeah. So this is a sneak peek of how a React component looks like. So say I wanted to create a button, it just takes some properties like type, text, and on click. These are all custom properties that I have defined, and you can just reuse this button elsewhere. So you won't need to style that button again, or you won't have to copy the JS button again and repeat it in your markup. You'll just have to import the button, like I have imported React here, and you can just use it anywhere. So Webpack is a bundler. Okay, so like we talked about compilation. So what Webpack does is that it takes all this TypeScript, SAS, and all the complex whatever you are using to have your better developer experience. You take all these files and just convert it to simple static files and serve it on any site. So uh, so what it does is that this static assets can be served on any server. Like you can use Express to serve it, you can use Python to serve it, you can use anything. So this is that's what Webpack does. I can talk about Webpack more, but let's not bore you with more theory. uh, we'll move on to White. So White is a new compiler which is getting very popular, and for React, people have started ditching Create React app and using White. Like White has really good. You can see the stats. Like White uses ES build, which is a JavaScript bundler, and it just takes 0.37 seconds, while Webpack 5 is still taking 55 seconds. So this is a very revolutionary technology, and I prefer using it whenever I can. So yeah, let's talk about virtual DOM now, and this is the interesting part. So yesterday Abhijit talked about DOM, like DOM manipulation and DOM. So if you can see, like in any site, if I inspect element, let's take Medium for example, you can see all these elements. You can see all the HTML elements over here. These HTML elements are basically the DOM. So this is the your DOM, which is a tree-like structure, and you can just inspect this and change the styles in it. So what React does is it creates its own virtual DOM. Like this site is using React. So if I go to the components, this is the virtual DOM. So whatever developer has created, the component that he has created is basically part of the virtual DOM, and you can inspect the DOM element, and you can monitor its states, whatever it's using, what are the props, and you can see that it is using Redux, which is a state management tool. We'll not get into that right now. So you can monitor the states, and it helps in debugging a lot. So this is the virtual DOM. So what React does is that it creates this virtual DOM for the at the time of development, and you can use and then at the when once the code has been developed and it's ready to move to production, then it's transpiled into a simple DOM structure. So if I take this and say I'll inspect this button. See, you can see the on-click function over here. So this on-click function is not the real on-click function. It's the virtual function that React has created, and then it is transpiled once the production code is ready, and then it goes into this the elements, which is the real DOM. So it's converted into the real DOM. Okay, so I think that's enough theory for today. I'll move on to some practical stuff now. So, for explaining how React works, like before getting into the practical stuff, there's just one concept that React has to like you have to understand React. So there are three phases in React. Uh, yeah. So these are the life cycle events in React. What we say is that a React component is first mounted, then it's updated. It's not necessary that it will update, but this is one of the phases that it might go into, and then it gets unmounted once you close the tab, or basically, not usually. Like it's not important that once the tab closes, the component will unmount. It can be done via code as well. So I'll go through this once we start coding, and yeah. So let's move on to the sandbox now. One second. I'll just share this window. First, I'd like to say, like, are there any doubts? Because this is a lot to process. I hope there aren't any doubts. So if you have any doubts, you can just leave them in the comment, and I'll check. Okay. Until I'm sharing the screen, you can ask if you want. Okay, cool. Looks like there are no doubts. Let's move on to the code. Yeah. So let's close this file for now. And yeah, so this is the structure of a React project. Even a Node project looks like this, if you would see. So this is the package.json file, and it contains the name of your project. Whenever you initialize your project, this name pops up. Like you have to enter the name in create React app, or however you're naming the file. So this is the name of the project. Then you can mention a version if you'd like, a description. All this comes in handy once you're shipping to production. All this comes in handy for SEO and many other purposes. And you can enter the keywords and all. And this is the main file, the index file, which I talked about in the node session, where you can just specify the main file to run. So if you look at the source folder, this is your file which is doing the work of rendering the React components. So we'll come back to this. Yeah. So these are the dependencies which are required in order for React to run. You can find all these dependencies on the npm repository as well. So if I search for React, you'll find that this is React. And whenever you're installing a particular software from npm, it is always advised to look at the number of downloads and who published the repository. See, now this React repository is from Facebook, so it's trustworthy. There might be some malicious files or also there if you don't choose the repository correctly. So be aware of this, because this might like cause vulnerabilities in your application as well. So yeah, so these are the weekly downloads and it looks good, so you can install it. Yeah. And similarly, we have React DOM and React scripts. If you're initializing the app with create React app, you won't have to do this manually. It'll do it on your own. Then we have TypeScript, Babel runtime. These are all dependencies that you require. Then we have scripts. So React script start, which basically serves your file for like serves your project on the browser at the time of development. Build is the command for transpilation and compilation of your scripts and creating a production ready code. Then you can even add your own custom scripts. You can add a test. This is just a dummy test that's given here. And eject is for like if you have used create React app, then you can just eject it, which if you want further customization than create React app, that's when this is called. So yeah. Then there's some custom, just some config. Yeah. Then we have this public. So the public directory is the directory which the common users see, like the people who are visiting your web application or a web app, your website basically. So these are the files which will go public. Yeah. And so you can see that this is basically a simple index html file which we saw yesterday. We have some meta tags which are just for SEO optimization and more. And we have a manifest file, and it's a simple tree structure. So the main thing to look at over here is this div. You can see that the div has been given the ID of root, which is very important. You just keep this in your mind. So this index.js file is referring to the div. As Abhijit showed yesterday, we were using DOM manipulation to get certain elements uh, from the HTML markup. So what we're doing is that we are referring to this HTML div, which is referenced by its ID. So we got this, and we are then using React DOM to render the application inside this div. So whatever you code in React goes inside this div, and you can then, if you wanted to have a different route, then there are different methods of doing that. You don't have to create a different index.html file. Usually, only one file remains there, and you won't need to create another index.html file ever. Like no other HTML file is required in React. Just one will do. And Moving on, as you can see that this app is coming from /app. So / is the relative import, and we are getting app.js from here. So this might look like HTML, but this is not HTML. This is called a JSX. So this is HTML like syntax, but it is not exactly HTML. So we use JavaScript, and like all these files are named as .js. You can see. So this JavaScript then gets transpiled into HTML at the time of build. So you can just create certain components and use them in your app, and it will do that. So this is the div that we're returning, and this div then goes up here in the index file. It's imported here, and then it gets rendered out into the div. So that's how React works. Yeah. So if you can see, if I go into app and I start editing this text, hello everyone, and see the site is updated. So this is how React works. So let's move on to the next topic. Before moving on, if you have any doubts, you can drop them in the comments. Okay. Looks like we have a very intellectual crowd. No questions. Let's move on. 1 second. I think I'm on the wrong PPT. Yeah. Yeah, so now we'll go through the mounting, updating, and unmounting phases that we talked about here, which are the component did mount, update, and more. So we have these hooks in React. So there are two types of programming in React. One is functional and one is class based. So class based programming is now being deprecated by, like, with reference to I think React's documentation. It's written there. You can check it out. So functional components are being more functional components with the help of hooks are being more popularized by React, and so that's what we'll do today. We'll go over these hooks and what these do. So before functional components were introduced, class-based components were there, and we had certain functions in there. So we had component did mount, update, and unmount. So what this means is that whenever the component is shown on screen, or it's rendered onto the screen, so that's when a component is mounted. So if I import a use effect here, this use effect works like the component on mount. So for the first time this app is rendered onto the screen, this function is called. So I'll say console.log mounted. Then you'll be able to see that the component has been mounted. See, so, and if you enter a dependency array, we'll talk about the dependency array later. But if I refresh this, see, it will run one time. So if you leave the dependency array empty, then it only runs for the first time, which is on mount. Okay, and then we have a different function, which is this one. This is called the cleanup function. So the cleanup function's purpose is to run code which you want to run on unmounting of the component. So when the button is disappears from here, that's when this function is called. So I'll like if I say console log unmounted, it won't work here because this application component always remains there. So I'll create another file. I'll say button. What I'll do is that I'll follow a proper file structure, which is with what I like to do is that I create a components folder here and create the components inside this. So I'll say button.js. Sorry, rename this to .js. Also, you can either do it .js or what some people like to do is that they can enter a component name JS, the extension name JSX. This helps identify the component more easily. So whenever you see an extension JSX, you'll know that it's a React component. So let's copy this simple syntax for this and paste it here for now. And I'll say button, and we can replace this by button. And I'll remove all this, and I'll say hello. I'll say button founded. One second. And I'll say unmounted over here once the button gets unmounted. So to import a component in your app, you can just go ahead and say button, and it will auto import it. So this is the syntax for importing a component. One second. Okay, we don't have a styles.css here. In this, yeah. So now you can see that this hello button is there. So I'll move on to the next hook, which is the use state hook. Use state basically is for maintaining a state. It's like maintaining variables. So what you can do is you can create a state. Like create a simple counter app for now. Like we'll have a count, and I'll say set count, which is the most basic app you'll find. Everyone uses it. So this is the initial state of the app. So the value of count right now is 0. So if like you define variables in JavaScript, you say I'll say count 2, and I'll say 0. So this is how you define variables in JavaScript. And if I render it out here, you can see it says 0, right? But if what if I do an on click? So I'll add an on click here, and on click of this button, I'll say add. Okay, and what we'll do is that we'll try to increment the value of the count one that we had. Sorry, let it go. So now I'll give this an on click, and in this on click function, I can I'll set count 2 is equals to. I'll put an arrow function here. Abhijit talked about arrow functions yesterday. If you don't remember or you're not familiar with it, you can watch yesterday's session, or you can even Google it if you want. And I'll set the count to as 2 on click of this button. So what I did here is I took this. This is called props. So this whole thing, what the thing is that it's called props, which stands for properties. So you can even do properties dot on click here. I'll say props dot on click. If you log this, whatever state or variables you pass into the component is comes through props or properties. So the on-click function that I'm sending through this component sits onto this on-click. So if I send this count here as well, and I go into props and I try to log this, I log the count here, as props dot count. So you can see that the count is 0. So this is how you pass data from one component to another. Okay, and once this on click is set, what I'll do is I set count 2 is equals to 2, and I said count 2. So if I click on this, then by logic the 0 should be replaced by 2, but it doesn't do that. See, so how React works is that in a particular render, whatever the value of the variable is, it remains the same. So if I click on add, it still says that the count 2 is equals to 0, but actually the count value has been incremented. It's just not rendered out on the screen. So in order to show what are the current states, you have to cause a re-render, and that's where use state comes into account. So this function is called the set state function, which is used to cause a re-render. So once you set the state, the count value gets updated and it causes a re-render. So let's even log this out. If I say count 2, and I'll put it in curly braces just for better logging, and I say add, then you can see the count value has been incremented to 2. Like I'll say count plus equal to 1. That will show you, that will make more sense. Yeah, now if you see, I click on add, the value is getting incremented, but it is not updating on the UI. That's because it's a normal variable, it's not a state variable. So this is the difference between a state variable and a normal variable. Now if I replace this count 2 by count, I'll say count, and I'll say set count as count plus 1, and I say add. uh, so now the value has been incremented. See, the value starts to get incremented and the component is re-rendered again. So this is how it's working. So you must be thinking that why this is showing 6 and why it's showing 7 here. That's just because I made a silly mistake here. I did the console log after. 1 second. I did the console log right, but what happens is that this is an async call, so it at times it takes time. So in React, if you want to log anything and you think there's a discrepancy, what you can do is that you can use effects to log your variables. So whenever the variable gets changed, this use effect gets called again. So that's what I was talking about before. This dependency array is used for, like, it's used to re-render once again if you want, based on the value of certain variables. So if I say count and I'll put this here and I start logging it here, then whenever the variable count gets incremented or decremented or its value gets changed, this particular block of code is run again. See, now you can see if I keep incrementing this, the value of count is 10 and it's shown as 10 over here as well. So this is how React works. So this was the use state variable and this is the use effect variable, and this is how it's working. Now I'll also show you the unmount function. Like, when is this called? You must be thinking that we've done so many things, but this still hasn't worked. So in order for it to work, the component has to be unmounted. So you can see that the button is always there on the screen. So what we'll do is that we'll render this button conditionally. I'll put this curly braces. This just means that I'm writing some JavaScript, and I'll say if the count is smaller than 5, then render out the button. Otherwise, it won't render the button. So right now you can see the count is 0, and if I keep on incrementing it and I reach 5, see, the button disappeared and the button got unmounted. See, so this basically is working as an if statement. So if count is true, then render the button, and the count is false because the count has reached 5, and the button has stopped rendering because and has been unmounted. So button unmounted was called. So this is the lifecycle event in React, and the reusability of this is huge. You can even say, like, if you want to change the text of the button conditionally based on greater than and smaller than. I'll say, like, I'll put props.text here, and you can put the text of the button conditionally as well. So have said props.text, then I'll have to pass text to this button, and I can say, I'll say increment. Okay, and let's reload the page to refresh the states. 1 second. I hope you're live. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. So you can see the value of the button has turned to increment. Now, if I wanted to change the text conditionally, what I could do is that I could change this into a ternary operator. I'll say that if count is smaller than 5, then I want to increment. Otherwise, I want to decrement. So I'll copy this and put it here, and I'll say decrement. And we'll change this to minus. And right, we don't need this count 2 anymore. Count 2, we can remove this. Yeah. So now if I start incrementing, it goes till 5, and now it says decrement. Okay, I spelled it wrong. Yeah. So now it says decrement because it turned to 5. Now if I start clicking on this, now it will start decrementing. Okay, there's some issue. Yeah. So now it turned to increment. So this is how it's working. So you could have done this in another way as well, because I see that a lot of code is being repeated. I just wanted to show the ternary operator here. So you can do it even in another way. Like, you can see that I've rendered button 2 times. But rather than doing this, I could have just done it once and just passed the props conditionally as well. So I'll say text, and I'll put this in curly braces, and I'll say count is smaller than 5, then increment, otherwise decrement. So we wrote the logic over here. And similarly, we could just put this ternary operator here, and I could have said if count is smaller than 5, then we want to increment, and if it's greater than 5 or equal to 5, then we want count minus 1. See, it's working fine. So this is how you write logics in React. Okay, so yeah, that's it for the hooks, and I'll go over just one more concept in React, which is handling forms, because handling forms is something which you'll use everywhere in React. Like how to handle inputs. We'll talk about controlled inputs and uncontrolled inputs. So I'll create a new sandbox, and I'll go with React again, and we'll create a simple form, and we'll see how to post it if you have an API endpoint. And yeah, like, I think Abhijit showed that yesterday, so you can even refer to that for posting, like making HTTP requests. But we'll be discussing the form part today. So yeah, i'll say I'll call it a registration form, and I'll take some inputs. I'll say one input I'll take I'll name this as first name. I'll give it a placeholder as first name. Okay, and I'll take another input as last name for now. So what happens is in React, um, what we try to do is that we try to not use document selectors. Like I will not give this an ID and select the input of this, the value of this input, and then send to the request. And we try to minimize the refreshes in our React app. Say this is a form, okay, and I'll take a button here. One second, and I'll say submit, and I'll put the type as submit as well. So what in traditional HTML and CSS, what we do is when we have to post, we put an action and we add the endpoint over here, and we usually do the method as post, or if it's a get request, you could even do a get, but usually for form inputs it's post, and you give the endpoint over here like HTTPS, your some endpoint. But what this does is that let's remove this action for now. And when I try to post this, like we try to submit the form, what it does is that it refreshes the page and it says not allowed. Okay, because it's just get. So I'll even remove the method post. That will make it easier. Yeah. So now when I'm submitting the form, what it's doing is that it's refreshing the page. So in React, we do not want that. We do not want the page to reload at all, because what it does is that it refreshes the states, whatever data you're holding, it refreshes it, and it makes the site slow. So we do not want that. So in React, what we do is that rather than taking the value from the input, what we do is that we store it in a variable. So I'll create a state variable here. I'll call it first name, and I'll say set first name. Also, do look that I'm using camel case over here. So for every variable, I'm using camel case, but for the naming of the component, I use a capital letter for the name of the component. So that's the convention that we follow in React, and I'll put this as a string. So as you can see, this is a state variable, and I can put a uh, value for this, and I'll say first name. It says use state not defined. Let's import this. Yeah. If you're wondering how I did that, uh, you can just press Control space, and it will give you a prediction for it, and you can press enter. Yeah. So if I change the state over here, like I'll say something like that, and it will show the state here. So you can even give an initial state if you want. Then we'll do the similar thing for the last name. I'll say set last name, and I'll put this value in here. See? Yeah, so it shows that. I'll call this B, and yeah. So now that we have the states in our app, when we submit the app, we don't want it to refresh. So right now it's still refreshing, if you'll see. Okay, and what uh, so what we'll do is that we'll create a function of handling the submit functionality, and we'll create an arrow function. We'll say handle submit. And what this handle submit is gonna have in its parameters is an event, because on we'll say on submit, rather I'll say handle submit. So if you're not sure what this event is, you can check out the previous video where Abhijit explained what events are and event listeners are. So once you submit the form, you get an event object. I'll call this event rather, and you can just log this. Also, if you're wondering if I why I did why I surrounded it with curly braces, this is just for better logging. Okay. So now if I press submit, the console was cleared because it refreshed the page. So what we'll do is that we'll prevent this functionality. So we'll say event.prevent default. So what this will do is that it will prevent the refreshing of the page. So I'll say submit, and now it didn't refresh the page, see? And it moved on to the next line, which is console.log, and you can get this event. Okay. So this is how we handle React forms. We create an on submit, and we first of all we do prevent default because we do not want the page to be refreshed. Then if we want, we can just use these values. Like I'll take these values and just post it somewhere to your backend if you want, or just use them, or like create an alert. I'll say hello, whoever this is, whatever name I input there. Okay, so now if I submit, it says hello this. I'll give some spacing here because it looks ugly. And I'll say John Doe here. Okay, right now it won't do that. I'll put it here. Submit. So it says hello John Doe. Rather than doing this, you can post it to a server somewhere if you want. Then if you noticed, I'm not able to change these inputs right now. I'm pressing the back button, but it won't change. That's because we have forcefully set the value of this input as the first name, which is John. Okay, so for handling the change functionality, we'll add a different on change function here. I'll say on change, and we'll have an arrow function here, and I can just set the value of first name as we saw before, and I can take the target. So now e.target is referring to the input, and I can just fetch the value from here. So now if I try to edit this, now you can see that it's editable. I'll say Jane, and if I submit, and you can see Jane Doe. So this is how you create a controlled input. This input is called a controlled input, where you're setting the state while you're editing it, and it's linked to this input is linked to a particular state, and you can then use the state further if you want. So this is how it works, and I'll do the similar thing for the surname as well, and I'll say set last name instead of first name, and now this is also working. See? So now I'll go over one more thing, which is if you can see that this is quite a hassle. Like we are we have to do these inputs again and again, and we have to create a separate on change function for it for every input, and we have to create a separate use state for uh, all the functions as well. So rather than doing this, what we can do is we can just create like we'll have to create certain use state. Like if you say we have 10 inputs, then I'll have to create 10 use states over here. So rather than doing that, we'll follow a different approach. And like with this with the use state as well and with the inputs as well, you'll have to create 10 separate inputs over here. So I don't want to do that. Like, I'm using React because I want reusability. So I will not prefer to repeat any code. What I'll do is that I'll create a single state. I'll create a single state and I'll call it form. I'll say form and I'll say set form. Now what I can do is that I can set an object. I'll say first name and I'll say last name, and I can give it a initial value of empty string. See, and now I don't have to like have separate values. Now if I wanted to create password, I can do that as well. I want confirm password. We can have that as well. So I'll just get rid of this and this. We have a separate form input, and we can just use this form values everywhere in the code. What I'll do is that I'll create a separate file rather. I'll say app1.js and I'll paste this code. Just for your sake, I'll keep this file here so that you can refer back. I'll remove this, and we'll write this function again. I will write that function again. Yeah, so rather than the value, I can say form dot first name. I can say we'll remove this on change for now. We'll handle that later. I'll say form dot last name. Okay, and what we'll do is that rather than having this in this, I'll use camel case so that we can recognize it easily. So as you can see, if I enter something here, it will come there, and similarly for all these. Okay. So what the other approach is that in this one, we had to create a separate function for each input. So rather than doing that, I will create a single function to handle all those. I'll say handle change, and I'll have this as an arrow function as well. And I'll have an event. I'll just call it E, and what I'll do is I'll log this. Okay, and for the input, I can say on change, and I'll say handle change. For now, I'm repeating the inputs so that you don't get intimidated by other logics. So we'll come on to on how to not repeat these inputs as well later. If you're still left with time, so I'll say password, and I can even do the type as password because we do not want to show the password in the inputs. And call this password as well. I'll add another field for confirm password as well. If you're wondering how I did this, I just selected this and I pressed Control D. And let's fix the spelling. Let's add some BR tags because it looks ugly. Okay, so now you can see the password fields are not working right now because we haven't set the state for them. But if I do this, see, it's protected. The confirm password field is not. I'll have to do password here. Yeah, that's better. So the main logic comes over here. When I try to handle the change, so let's refresh the console. Yeah, that's better. Now if I try to change, you can see the event will be logged. So if I open this, you can see there's a target. Okay, so as I showed before, we'll have a property name on it as well. Like I showed value before, so I'll show value as well, and I'll say e dot target dot value, and I'll say name. I'll say e dot target dot name. Okay, I'll refresh it once again. See, now we know that what value is being typed, and we know what the value which we're mutating. So like we're mutating this input field, which is the first name. So we know that as well. So these are the only two things that we require in order to edit the state. So what we'll do is we want to set the form because we want to re-render it in order to change the inputs. So we will use set form. So we say set form, and I'll pass an object here. This object is similar to this object only. Okay, so what I'll do is that I'll use spread operator here. I'll say dot 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 form. So Abhijit talked about this yesterday, which what it does is that it takes all the data inside the variable and it just spreads the values. So what it will happen is that all these initial values will come in place of dot 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 form, somewhat like this. So it's shortcut for that. Okay, so we can just say dot 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 form, and what we want to do is that we want to set the name field first. So we want e.target.name as here, like here. So we'll say e.target.name and we'll set it to the value, which is e.target.value. But as you can see, it's errored right now because it's expecting a key and not a variable. So we can't put dots there. So the way to do this is that we just surround this with square brackets. So it will treat it as a variable rather than a key. So this thing will be replaced by whatever the name is, which is first name. So this e.target.name will be replaced by first name rather. Or if you're editing the last name, then it will be last name there. So now if we set the form and try to edit, see now it's editing. Okay. So this is how it works. And if we do this for some other input, it will work for that as well. Now we are able to edit the fields and it shows all the data. And if you want to monitor the data at any time, you can again spin up a use effect and log that. The best thing to do in React is keep logging all the inputs so that you get an idea. So you can just enter the form variable inside the use effect and log it whenever its value gets changed. So now I'll clear the console and try to edit it. So you can see the value of the form gets logged every time whenever each field gets edited. So this is how you handle forms in React. And one last thing that I still see code repetition over here because like see you can see that I'm doing e.target.name and then I'm doing e.target.value again and again. That's something that I want to prevent. So what I can do is just there's a concept called destructuring. So I can destructure the values from e.target. I'll say const name and value from inside of e.target. So I can remove e.target here. I'll do Control D again and just remove this. Now the code looks cleaner. and it works. The functionality remains the same. Form gets logged again. So this is how you handle state in React, and the code looks very clean. You don't have to you don't have to do any repetitions here. You just use a single use state. You don't have to create a separate state for each variable, which is a very big hassle. And yeah, that's it. And once the state gets like this is just use state. If you have a big application, for handling state, there are even different technologies like Redux, and we have React Context, which you can look into further. We'll probably do a tutorial later about that as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And in further tutorials, we may also look at how to render these inputs. Like right now, still there is code repetition, which I'm not a big fan of. We can just map these inputs, the one which Abhijit showed yesterday, like object. You can go through a certain array, map through it, and then you can just show these fields. So yeah, that's what it is. So that's all for React today. And any further questions, you can drop it in the comments. Okay, looks like that's it. Also, if you want the attendance for it, for both the sessions, you have to fill up a Google form, which was shared yesterday, and this to get the attendance for today, the Google form is shared in the comments. So yeah, if you have any doubts, guys, you can drop it in the comments, or you can reach me on social media, reach me or Abhijit on social media as well. Our Discord, we'll be active on our Discord as well. And yeah, that's it. And if you want the summary for the two sessions, we have a Notion document in the comments as well. You can look for it, the quick links and summary part. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Welcome, Advait. I'm glad to have you here. Okay. Let's end the session. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you in the next session.